And we welcome you to another edition of This Is Wrestling. It is the one and only Lever Sage. That's me and Hornsey, Zach friggin' McGibbon. Hornsey, how are you this week?
I'm doing good this week. I have come down from last week's episode where I came into that episode confused, lost, not understanding of anything really that was going on. But I think after reading some of the comments back and hearing from some folks after that episode, I think I understand a little bit more. Some I still kind of disagree with, but I at least understand a little bit more on the thought process of things. So I'm interested to discuss all about that, and of course everything going on in the world of professional wrestling this week.
Well, yeah, there's a lot to talk about, from a lawsuit against Jon Moxley and AEW, from I think their shows in the last 2 weeks are over now. 4-hour extravaganzas, which, by the way, let me get this off my chest really quick.
Okay.
If I set a PVR because I can't sit down to watch a 4-hour program, you know what I don't need, Zach?
An overrun?
Yeah. I was going to say 2 words for you. An overrun.
Yeah.
Overrun being one word, folks, and an overrun. Seriously, an overrun on a 4-hour show. And then I missed the very, very end after I sat there for 4 hours. Are you kidding me? Come on. Be better than that, AEW. You don't need to do that. But we got a lot to talk about because I think there's some really good stuff on those shows. And of course, the Battle of Mexico is upon us in the month of June between the WWE and AEW. So we'll touch on that as well. But I do want to go back to last week here to start. And we asked for some feedback. And I know you got some feedback. I got some feedback as well about where we are in the world of the WWE and what people actually want as opposed to what we want. Because, yeah, I'm a wrestling fan. You're a wrestling fan. But this is a show that everybody has input on what they want and what they like as wrestling fans. And those aren't the same for everybody. If they were, then that would suck. So I love the fact that everybody has some different opinions. And I ran into somebody this week who was charged up about it and told me in no uncertain terms that the last 6 months have been the best booked shows by the WWE in a decade. I then tried to pick my jaw up off the floor. I was unable to. So I got into a discussion about what he liked and why he thought that this last 6 months was the best 6 months that he has seen in a very long time. I tried to look at that objectively. And as you said, we asked for some feedback, and I wanted to read this one because I got a lot of feedback on this one. Actually, when I guess I haven't asked for people to chime in and email me specifically, so I got a lot of emails this week. But this was what I wanted to read because our good friend Thomas in Halifax, and this is one of the first ones I got, and it still stuck out, Zach, after all of the ones that came in. And I just want to give it a read, and then we'll talk about it for a minute. Good afternoon, gents. And you too, Hornsey.
Wow.
I think that's what. No, actually, I just made that.
I was going to say, I have a copy of this email, and that is exactly not what was said in that email. Putting words in poor Thomas in Halifax's mouth. How dare you?
Well, no. Thomas would be happy that I did that. Don't say poor Thomas. Thomas would be happy. Anyway, so just wanted to give you a glimpse into what I look for in a WWE show. First, some background. I've been a WWE fan for approximately 35, 36 years of my life. I love DCW and watched it, WCW, while it was at its peak as well, but always came back to WWE for whatever reason. I've not been a consistent watcher of AEW since CM Punk left, but will still tune in now and then when I hear they did a good show. So what do I want now? I want a show I can sit down and watch with my children, which we did Saturday night. While I agree with a lot of what you said on your podcast, I must add that my kids, they don't care about these issues. They want to see Cody, Jey Uso, CM Punk, John Cena, etc. I've always watched WWE and have seen way worse. So at this point, I'm happy to have a show on Netflix that I can watch with my kids and a couple of friends that doesn't last 4 or 5 hours. Would I like to see better matches? Sure. Do I want to sit down with my 10-year-old son and watch a wrestler drink another wrestler's blood? No, I don't. Do I want to see him being sliced up with a pizza slicer? No. Hopefully, this makes a little bit of sense. I'm obviously biased, and I admit that, but it's honestly what I'm looking for in a wrestling show these days. Also, Rob Van Dam was my favorite wrestler growing up. Someday I'll have to explain to my children what my RVD 420 t shirt means or what RVD meant when he said he was the whole effing show. Cheers from Thomas in Halifax. And I wrote Thomas back and said to him, first of all, thanked him for taking the time to be able to write in. And I thought that this was a very well thought out, poignant email, thoughtful and honest to what he is looking for. And I do think I'm going to lump you into this, but I'm not going to throw you completely under the bus.
I was just going to say in the email, I was kind of buried a little bit, but in your response email.
Oh, did I forward that to you too? That's too
yes.
bad.
Yes, I saw what you sent over to Thomas as well. So I was like, wow.
Did you see that? Oh man.
You're like Dixie Carter with her emails and just accidentally forwarding it to the wrong person when you're trying to bury somebody. So
Zach, there's no accidents. Okay. Remember that. There's no accidents. I will say here that sometimes I get caught up in what I think is really good and what I don't like, which again, it's our show and that's what we get to do is point out things that we like and have opinions. And if we don't have opinions, then it just becomes boring. But I guess this one really hit me the hardest because all of the things that Thomas is talking about, like I don't have a young son to sit down and watch wrestling with. If I did, they would sit down and watch Swerve and Will Ospreay from this week or whatever. But you know what I mean.
Mm-hmm.
That's what he wants. And a couple other people that I talked to this week as well. Look, the world is going away from cable television. And I talked to 3 people this week that all do not have cable and all watch the WWE because it is on Netflix and because it is easy and because they know that they can sit down and watch it at any point. Doesn't have to be Monday at 8, Friday at 8. They can sit down and watch it whenever it is convenient for them to sit down and watch a program with their family. And when they watch that program, they're looking for certain things. I just wish I was more staunch on the yeet Jey Uso and how great he was in his 51-day reign as champion, I think.
Yes.
We were going to have to talk about him losing to Gunther last week because we haven't talked about that yet either. But the whole point is that this email hit me, and Thomas, thank you again, because I want to see that side. I want to understand that side. Sometimes I feel like I try and talk Zach into that other side, but I don't see it like you see it. And there were many people that approached me this week saying it's just not what they look for in some of the AEW stuff or whatever else they look for in professional wrestling. They like what the WWE is giving them. What do you think about all of that?
Yeah, so when you sent me that email and I read through and I thought it was like you, I thought it was a tremendous email and really kind of helped put things a little bit more into perspective. And you remember it's like, okay, yes, this is what professional wrestling is for people as well, as something that they want to have their kids be able to watch. And so the big sort of thing I got as well from this email is, being able to see having that easy access to professional wrestling while also being able to see some of the biggest stars in the business, right? So he mentioned Cody Rhodes and CM Punk and John Cena. Jey Uso was also mentioned in this email. but seeing like stars and being like, okay, these are the stars of professional wrestling.
Don't take a shot at Jey Uso. Saying he was also mentioned. You mentioned the big stars, and then say, "Oh, and Jey Uso was also mentioned." See what he did, Thomas? Just so subtly, he can't help himself. That's why I forwarded him the response in the email.
I'm just relaying what I read and what I saw, and I'm just giving a critique. That's all. But I understand. You know, that's the thing about having a WWE and AEW is having two distinct sort of identities, and why it's so important to have different wrestling promotions have different sort of identities instead of being so crossed over with each other. With WWE, it's more, you know, mass market, mainstream, looking to try and reach as many people as possible. While with AEW, I would argue it's trying to reach, you know, that wrestling fan that's like, I want to see professional wrestling, and this is what I look for in professional wrestling, a little bit more grittier, a little bit more no nonsense. I kind of equate it to, you know, it's funny, I was watching clips from Breaking Bad this past week, and it just kind of popped up on my feed, and I was thinking, you know, Breaking Bad considered one of, if not the greatest television show of all time, right? But Breaking Bad at that time was on cable. It was something that was, you know, people would talk about it, people wanted to discuss, and it was certainly popular. But Breaking Bad, it's not going to be viewed by everybody, certainly not young kids when people watch Breaking Bad. But in the sense, if you wanted to watch something that's kind of a more mainstream show, something that's more mass market, and trying to reach a little bit more people, like I think to, you know, some of the, you know, cop shows like NCIS, right? Or something like that, Law and Order. You know, more people are like, I just want to be able to sit down, turn on my television, and I could see Law and Order. And it's a great television show, and that's what they're able to get. They get their entertainment. But then you get the people that are like, I'm going to seek this out. I'm going to seek out and try and watch Breaking Bad and try and watch every episode because this is what I look for in TV. So that's kind of the comp I kind of took away from this, from the email is what's sort of available and what is able to watch. In his case, he has kids, what he's able to watch with his kids. Totally understand if, you know, you don't want to show your kids everything on AEW, especially with some of the angles that we've seen on AEW. I totally understand that. But that's sort of the comp I kind of took away from this. I thought this was a tremendous email and really helped put things in perspective.
So when we discuss the WWE, I try really hard to keep that more broad perspective and some of the good things. I think sometimes it's hard, though, coming off of a show that I thought was horrible, to pretend like it's not horrible because somebody else doesn't mind there being bad wrestling on it. Do you know what I mean? So I think what I've learned from Thomas's email and, you know, some of the other people, I talked to a guy named Mike. I talked to a guy named Kevin. I talked to a guy named Scott this week. And they all kind of had this same story that Thomas did, give or take. Mm-hmm. And so I think what I've taken from it, and you can tell me if this is fair or not, is if we're going to review a particular show, then I'm going to tell people what I thought of the show. And it's not necessarily what I think of the WWE as a whole every time we review a certain show. It's like if I'm analyzing, in my former career, used to analyze, say, the Senators and the Carolina Hurricanes on a January 6th game. Like, honestly, who cares? And if the Sens were horrible that night and they lost 7-1 and were absolutely out of their element, that night on the post-game show, they were going to get smoked. They were going to, like, you're not going to get away from all of the bad things that team did that night. But the next day, maybe they're playing back-to-back. Maybe the Boston Bruins are in town, and you turn the page. And just because they got smoked 7-1 last night and were absolutely horrible doesn't mean that they're a horrible hockey team, that they're going to be 0-82 and they're just going to be horrible all year long. And I do feel like that's at least come into it a little bit for me for the WWE, that I am taking individual things and making them a little bit more holistic and painting it all with the same brush. So I'm going to try to not do that, if that's fair. But that doesn't mean I'm going to be lacking in my critique on individual shows.
Yeah.
If that's fair. Because again, Money in the Bank is supposed to be, to me, it's their 5th biggest show of the entire year, behind the 4 big ones of WrestleMania, SummerSlam, Survivor Series, and Royal Rumble. Money in the Bank's number 5. So if that's your 5th biggest show all year, I thought it sucked. And I am going to tell people that it sucked. And the big Ken Rosenthal, and here's why. Because that's what Ken Rosenthal used and still does all the time.
Yep.
This is why, and here's why. That doesn't mean that the whole operation just sucks 24/7. So if it's okay with you, Zach, I'm going to try and take that approach with it and address individual things and not critique everything continually under one umbrella.
I think that's fair. I think it just kind of goes back to, and what you kind of touched on it, if we see something that we think sucks, we're just going to say it sucks. You know, it's sometimes, you know, not everything's going to land. For me, obviously, I think I've been a little bit more critical of WWE than others have been. And I kind of do that in the sense that I look at the WWE through the lens of they are the number one company. They are the ones that kind of set the standard for everything in professional wrestling, whether I want to like it or not. But they are the number one. And so when I review anything going on with WWE and all of these shows, I look at it through the lens of they're the number one company. What's the number one company doing to kind of set their standard and show that they are the number one company? And if they put out shows that I feel lack that ability, lack that, you know, that sense that I'm watching the number one wrestling company putting on a show, I'm going to make mention of it. And if that means that I'm going to be critical of matches that were on the show or storylines that took place or how it was written, whatnot, I'm going to make note of it. So that's how I kind of view with WWE. And for me personally, you know, I've always felt like some reviewers out there are a little light when it comes to going on WWE stuff and how they're critical of shows. I feel like for me, I got just see what I see on the TV and I try and relate it to the good folks, the good listener here on this podcast. And one of the things I'm always appreciative of with this podcast is we've got a great mix of listeners that tune in. Like we've got WWE folks, like hardcore WWE folks that listen in. We've got hardcore AEW fans that tune in. And we got people that are a mixture of both. And all of us disagree with us in many sense, in many different ways, whenever they listen in to us. But it goes back to what I feel is what helps make this show and how we're able to continue on this show is that we're honest about our thoughts about how we feel with either promotion. I feel like we've been also critical on AEW when it's needed to be critical. So that's how I kind of view with the WWE stuff. And my breaking point really was just this R-Truth, now Ron Killing stuff. Like, that's where I was like, what's the standard with this company? Why is this kind of being praised by the fan base when this is the number one company? And at one point, you know, the fans were actively rooting against a John Cena, you know, R-Truth match at Saturday Night's Main Event. But then he comes back and all of a sudden it's praised. The WWE gets praised. Right. That's where I kind of poke holes in and say, okay, this is where I'd be critical of different elements. And one quick aside too, I was told I was a little too hard on one Hunter Hearst Helmsley, Paul Levesque, from last week's episode. I did not say a nice thing about him, and I was told I was a little too tough on Mr. Levesque.
Huh. Never heard the words "too tough" and Zach McGibbon in the same sentence. So I would have loved to have heard that.
Yeah. No, I heard that from somebody at work actually who tuned in because the thing is with him is he's kind of a casual. So this was the same coworker from last week where I read out that text. So he wanted to tune in to hear our thoughts. He kind of, you know, dips in and out every once in a while. He's a big hockey guy, so he's listening to more hockey podcasts and wrestling podcasts. But he tuned into ours and he enjoyed the review and had a good listen. But he mentioned to me, yeah, it's a little tough on old Paul Levesque when it comes to some of my criticisms.
Okay, I actually don't think you're Tough enough.
Oh, really?
That's
Okay.
another WWE show as well, right? So I think when I look at this and I understand that this comment as of like a week ago now is a little bit more outdated. But when we were doing the show last week, and this is what I kept telling people that I would have these discussions with, I'm like, okay, I'm trying to see it from your point of view. You want to tune in and you got your 6-year-old and you want to see the stars. And like one guy he's got a 13-year-old daughter that he watches wrestling with, but she only watches sometimes.
Mm-hmm.
And this is the guy that thinks it was the best booked last 6 months, like in a decade. So my question to him was, okay, if that's true, who are the champions right now? Who are your actual champions? And the answer was John Cena, who is a major, major star, but unfortunately can't do anything in the ring. And it still is, and that's sometimes where we differ. You want to tune in to see the star talk or see the star not really do a whole bunch. Go back and watch Hogan for like 20 years. No, I'm getting off track. But John Cena can't even bump anymore. So it's not possible for him to have a really good match. That's if you put him in the ring with someone who's really good. It's still not possible. So John Cena is your champ. And then Jey Uso was your champion. And for all the praise that was giving Jey Uso, and you got to go with them, and they did, and like the eating and the kids and all of that stuff, he never lived up to it in the ring. He never got to that level. And we ended up doing that show on a Sunday, and then the next day they took the belt off of him after 51 days and gave it back to Gunther. But at the time that we did the show, Jey Uso was your world champion, who also cannot wrestle. I'm a big fan of the character of Dominic Mysterio. He's not going to give you a good wrestling match. He's your Intercontinental title holder. Becky Lynch, big women's star. She can't wrestle anymore. So you just think of all of the Zelina Vega. I'm sure a really nice girl, really like decent character, popular in some, niche crowds. She's not a great wrestler. So actually at the time of the show, easily to me, it's not even close that the best actual wrestler that's a champion is Jacob Fatu. And he just got there.
Yep.
And so that's what I would explain is like, okay, the best person to go out that actually has a championship belt around their waist to go out to give you, I think, a really good combination of entertainment and wrestling is Jacob Fatu, but he's not the guy you're tuning in to see. You're tuning in to see all of these people that were either once good or never good, but became bigger stars outside of the ring than they ever were inside of the ring. In John Cena, Becky Lynch, Zelina Vega, Jey Uso, I don't think ever really got to that level. He just kind of hung around some other really good people. And that was my question to them. It's like, okay, like I hear what you're saying, but you're tuning in to see all of the people talk because that's what attracts you. And that's okay, but it's just not what professional wrestling means to me in my definition. Is that a fair comeback when I was having this discussion with people? Because that was my counterpoint. It's like I get a lot of talking and a lot of storylines, but I don't get the payoff. So it's like, why do I continually want to go back and go back and go back when I'm not getting any payoff? to me, WrestleMania was one of the worst it's been in a very long time, except for the Saturday night main event of Punk and Rollins and Reigns. Followed it up with like their biggest thing that happened at Elimination Chamber was John Cena turning heel, and one of the biggest things ever. It wasn't even in a match. Do you even remember who the main event was that night? Before Cena turned heel?
I actually have forgotten.
Right. And that's the point. That these things that are happening, they aren't professional wrestling. What they are is a bunch of characters that are doing storylines that you like, the drama, the soap opera, the Young and the Restless part of it, but it's not paying off in the ring.
Yeah.
And that's my issue with it. But I do understand the 6-year-old doesn't need a payoff in the ring of a 25-minute classic, and, at some point we'll talk about Will Ospreay and Swerve Strickland kicking off Dynamite. But like on a regular TV show, a 30-minute instant classic, that's not what the 6-year-old is watching and wants. And I understand that. But the parents, although they want their kids to enjoy it, do you not want to enjoy it as well? Or do you not care at all except for what your 6-year-old thinks? Because that's okay. Like, as a parent, I'm not a parent. I can try and understand, but I'm not a parent. So is it just what your 6-year-old wants? Because if that's it, if that's why you watch professional wrestling, okay. Like, that's your why. But it's not my why. And I don't think a lot of people's why, week after week after week, that love this business, want the business to thrive, want it to succeed, want it to continue, want it to be the best. I think there's a lot of people out there that want the best for professional wrestling and not what their 6-year-old wants in the moment. And I'm not being critical. If that's what you want, is your 6-year-old to be happy watching Netflix, to sit down and see John Cena, okay, that's awesome, because you're tuning in to something. I just don't know that that's everybody either. So that was my response to them. And I want to know if you think it's fair.
I think that's totally fair. I think a lot of what you said there is what I would say, to be quite honest. So I don't think there's too much I can add to that in terms of a response. I think you nailed it on the head there in terms of what we kind of look for when we watch professional wrestling. I think you have to have a nice balance of everything, right? When it comes to professional wrestling, obviously, people hear it from me all the time whenever they listen to the episodes. I'm a big fan of the in-ring, and I believe the in-ring should be a big part of professional wrestling, and what makes it stand out from other forms of entertainment and sport is what they're able to do in the ring. I'm not saying, the eliminations of all promos or all backstage segments or all skits or whatever. Obviously, there's a place for that in professional wrestling and how it can be implemented. But I think right now, in the current landscape of WWE, the emphasis is more on when you talk about storytelling. They don't talk about storytelling in the ring. They talk about storytelling in the broader sense of, all right, character interacts with other character, and then this character interacts with this character, and that's how we move forward, as opposed to a professional wrestling match where you have two people fight it out, whether it be to win a title or win a title shot or win this sort of stipulation or win this sort of gimmick or whatever, right? Something that involves the match. I feel like there is less emphasis on that in WWE than it has been in quite a while. So I other than that, I don't have too much to add. I think you nailed it on the head there, Lee.
So to follow that up with what the WWE is now doing, their title match, they're using a bit of the history of what CM Punk has said and what he has been unwilling to do previously in doing business in Saudi Arabia. And they're kind of using that on television, which to me is a little counterintuitive to what I'm hearing from the people. And I get it that whether it's Thomas or Mike or Scott or anybody, if you sit down and at any point you can turn on Netflix and watch John Cena fight CM Punk, I don't think that your 6-year-old kid cares that it's in Saudi Arabia. I understand they might not know that. They don't get it. They don't know all of the bad things that have happened previously in the WWE's relationship with Saudi Arabia, controversial at best. They don't care about all those things. They want to see the big stars. Now that is on in Saudi Arabia with the time difference. It will allow you to sit down in the afternoon to watch that with your children. But I want to know what you think about using the fact that CM Punk has been very vocal previously about saying that he does not want any part of that side of it. And now they're clearly using those words. And CM Punk is going to have to go to Saudi Arabia to fight John Cena, having done nothing to earn a title shot that I can really recall. But that's not with our truth there. I don't, you know what I mean? Like it's nobody ever has to do anything to earn a title shot. But it's like we're gonna put 2 stars in the ring, but we're gonna put them in the ring in a match where Punk's got to go against his beliefs. He's now with the company. It's impossible for them to have a good match with the condition that John Cena is in. I just think that this is a little bit backwards again. And just the thought of getting CM Punk and John Cena in Saudi Arabia, I don't know why somebody thought that was a good idea, but maybe all the people that we talked about and the WWE fans don't care that it's in Saudi Arabia. But I guess in long-winded, Zach asking, they're using the fact that it's in Saudi Arabia as part of the storyline, which then contradicts itself to me.
Yeah. No, I agree. From a CM Punk angle, I think it just continues to show in my mind in terms of his hypocritical banging of the drum on certain issues and then going back on them. And he's been historically known to do that. I say that as a CM Punk fan and a fan of his work, one of my favorite professional wrestlers of all time.
Let me ask you, what's he supposed to do right now?
Well,
if they tell him that, hey, you work for the company now and we want you in a title match, it's going to be in Saudi Arabia, what should he do?
I would be saying, if he has the option not to go, he should not go. But I don't believe that he has no option not to go. I'll just say that.
Okay.
I think if he wanted to say, hey, I'm not going, this is my beliefs and whatnot, I think he's going now because of everything that's surrounding Saudi Arabia. And it's, it's a lot more accepted now in terms of the sports culture. I'm not going to be here to argue whether that's a good thing or a bad thing. This is just an observation. I think it's just more accepted in the grand sporting culture than it was in 2018, 2019, when these events were starting to be put together by WWE. I still think in the case of Punk, it's different with Punk for me because Punk is a guy that goes out there and bangs the drum and plays morality police whenever he's out there. And so he's got to reap what he sows in terms of, going out there and having to go back on stuff that he had previously said. And he continues to do that, continues to be a hypocrite about that. And so I'm not sympathetic to that when it comes to Punk. Turning into the storyline aspect, I do think is a little bit weird because it is something that, they're trying to make it, seem like this is how they're going to babyface Punk going in. But at the end of the day, this is also something WWE is in a partnership with Saudi Arabia. And you're trying to make the Saudi Arabian government a heel in this storyline, essentially. And utilizing the ties into a storyline. I understand we hear about in professional wrestling all the time when it comes to, utilizing real life elements and putting it into stories to try and make it more captivating and get people to believe and understand, are these lines being blurred here, whatnot, right? But it's also one of those deals where you can't play too close to the fire with this because then it might backfire on you. And in this case, we're early on into this story. There's still some time left to see where it goes. So maybe there's something that I'm missing out on and they've got planned for later on. But right now, I agree with you. I think it just seems counterintuitive. And I just don't understand kind of utilizing this aspect when, especially when people have kind of accepted Saudi Arabia being part of the general sports sphere anyway.
So I guess to conclude, for all of the feedback that came in off the last episode, we want to thank you. And it's going to change my viewpoint a little bit as to a little bit more individual, like I said, about the night or the particular episode of action, whether it's a Raw, whether it's a SmackDown, whether it's a pay-per-view, PLE, and not have the sweep of emotion when it comes to like, hey, we're going to start negative. It's probably going to be no good. And then when it's not any good, see, I told you so. I'm going to try to not do that. The problem for me is, while one of the people came up and said it's been the best book 6 months in a decade, I honestly think since March the 1st, it's been one of the worst booked 3 months of any time period.
Yeah. Definitely the worst booked of the Paul Levesque era for sure.
Like since the day after they turned John Cena heel, so March the 2nd until now, I think it's been absolutely atrocious over that course of time. But I will try to look at individual events a little bit differently. So with that, Zach, I think that's going to be a wrap on this show. And then we will do another one coming up here very soon. But this has been, I think, a nice, what I would call a post game of last episode. And then we'll have to get back to some real AEW, some real WWE, and the actual matches that are going on, because I think what we'll do is we got Mexico coming up, and it's kind of a big time. So we'll have to get another one in here very shortly to be able to, I think, properly encapsulate, because I know you have a lot of thoughts on Mexico being used by both promotions as this odd battleground, right? And maybe you can just preview that in our next episode, talking about that now, about, why do you think, like in our next episode, you're going to talk about Mexico being this battleground? How come?
Yeah, it's in the sense that obviously WWE purchasing AAA, they've got a majority stake in the company now, 51%. And obviously we've seen the last couple of shows that they've done. They had a Triple Mania Regia show, which is not a true Triple Mania show, but utilizing WWE, TNA talent as well this past Sunday. And then obviously you have the CMLL show that's coming up Wednesday, where AEW is going to be having their shows at Arena Mexico. It's kind of an interesting look right now in terms of where these two promotions now are trying to expand out. With WWE, they want to be this global brand. They want to have WWE be the primary wrestling promotion. When you say professional wrestling, the first thing you think of should be WWE. And in the case of AEW, obviously partnering with CMLL, a long-time staple of professional wrestling, Lucha Libre, even longer than WWE. They've been around since 1930 if you go back to their EMLL days. Being able to partner with these American promotions, and now it seems to kind of be a battle that's going on between both of these promotions over Mexico, and trying to, establish their turf and try and get their promotion over to the fan base that's over in Mexico. So I think it's a fascinating time right now because of that, because you're starting to see more people sort of talk about Mexico a little bit more, and some of the wrestlers that are coming out of that area. So I think it will be fascinating to kind of look through, especially after Dynamite this Wednesday, and how Arena Mexico will look on TV, and the growing relationship between AEW and CMLL, seeing more CMLL wrestlers, and also WWE, where you're starting to see some AAA wrestlers. I mean, we saw Octagon Jr. On the Money in the Bank show, right? It's something that's I think is very fascinating to kind of keep an eye on as we kind of continue on with this wrestling stuff.
And to end with a little humor, did you see the stat for Dominic Mysterio and his title defenses of the Intercontinental Championship?
I have not seen the stat, but I am eagerly awaiting what this stat is.
That he has only, in his title defenses, he has only defeated shapes.
Oh, that's true. Yeah. Pentagon, Octagon.
Yeah, no, that's it. That's his title. That's his defenses on major shows.
Wow.
He's beat a pentagon and an octagon.
Wow.
So I thought
Can't wait for
was,
the match against Hexagon and what are some of the other gons?
How did TNA never have a hexagon wrestler with a hexagon ring?
That's true. Yeah. They should have implemented that. Unbelievable. I mean, there's a lot of things you could say about TNA and why didn't they do this?
I know, but they were identified really with the 6-side ring. Anyway, we digress. From the pentagon octagon. See, we can get really silly, but this has been, I think, a really good post-mortem show on the program last week, and we want to give ample time to give the battleground of Mexico between the WWE and AEW. Plus, I think there's some really good stuff going on in AEW right now as they lead up to All In July. So we'll do that shortly, Zach, on our next episode. But this has been a lot of fun. We also encourage people to go and check out our Dark Side of the Ring, which there's another episode out on the original Sheik. So lots to come here. And I thought it was tremendous work by you. I'm giving you a lot of credit for putting out the episode Dark Side of the Ring, Daphne, on Friday the 13th.
Thank you. Thank you.
Well done. See, that did not get past me. It probably got past most of our listeners because they're not that bright, but it did not.
Geez.
Oh, sorry.
We just spent a whole half hour.
I know, Zach. I just couldn't help myself.
I didn't say it, just for the record. To send your angry emails to Lever Stage, I didn't say anything.
But what I'll do is I'll email you back and say Zach did anyway.
No, please. The last thing I need.
Just like I did with Thomas.
Yes.
Anyway, this has been good, and we'll have another episode coming out shortly. For Zach McGibbon and Lever Sage, thanks again for listening to This Is Wrestling.